Service members of Reddit, what is your worst military wife story? Dude in my platoon's wife falsely accused her ex-MP boyfriend of debauchery, went as far as stabbing a mattress and swallowing condom to set him up. Dude spends weeks in jail before being cleared of all charges. When it comes to light, it was crazy lady vindictive bulls. She amped up the crazy. She handed her friend her and my platoon mate's baby through a window at night while they watched a movie. Platoon mate went to check on the baby and it was missing. Prompted the first Amber Alert in Alaska history. She tried to pin it on the MP as some sort of act of vengeance. I can only imagine what the poor dude was thinking when the cops came to him with this. He was very quickly eliminated as subject and they figured out that the baby was safe rather quickly. I have to. First, I was the witness to one of my soldiers' wedding. It was a typical Joe wedding and that it took place midday, at a Wings End Things, during the lucky bride's lunch break. The mother of the bride owned said Wings End Things but refused to attend the ceremony despite being at work that day. It was pretty amazing. Second, I was at officer candidate school with an army hot blonde. She was a deployment 9/10 and everybody hit on her. She was drowning in attention but it was all for naught because she was married to a green beret or something. Well, all that attention finally got to her and she started sleeping with the cadets. It got to the point of her and another married female getting nailed in a hotel room at the same time and they reportedly high-fived mid-coitus. About 3/4 of the way through the course she started to put on a little weight and it sure seemed like her belly was growing faster than the rest of her. About 4 weeks before graduation it came out that she was, in fact, pregnant with who the frick knows baby. Not long after graduation I heard that her marriage to Mr. SF did not survive the encounter. Hope this counts. My grandfather was stationed in Germany where he met my grandmother. They got married in Germany and she moved back to the States with him, where his family was absolutely not very happy about it. His mother actually offered to buy him a brand new car if she married a nice American woman instead. Obviously my grandma wasn't too happy about that and decided the best course of action was to have a second wedding in the US to prove she wasn't going anywhere. They were married 55 years and she's still living in the original family home. She really didn't go anywhere. Oh wow, a nice story in this thread. My brother-in-law was on both sides of crappy cheating stories. He married a woman he chatted to online for a few weeks when he was 19. Then he had to go to Iraq. A month after he left she told him that he got her pregnant. He comes home after 6 months then she has a baby. The baby definitely is not his. Fast forward 10 years. He's married to an awesome chick we all like. She works a job and takes care of everything around the house. He cheats on her with her 18-year-old girl that worked at Sonic. She catches him and leaves for a weekend to go stay with her sister to figure out what to do. He puts all her stuff in cardboard boxes out under the carport and moves in the new girl. He really is a piece of crap. Air Force and Navy veteran here and I'm a Marine wife. The worst thing I ever experienced was the death of a beautiful 5-month-old baby girl. The SGT and his wife were serious gamers. The wife also suffered from mental health issues. Both were weird and ignorant. The wife was tired of the baby crying and not sleeping. So, she propped a bottle on a pillow, used more pillows to cushion her, and left her in the master bedroom while she and the hubby gamed. The little girl suffocated. Neither parent checked on her for 12+ hours. They said they thought she was sleeping. They found her dead, left her for several more hours, and made a failed attempt to resuscitate her while they were on the phone with 911. They're so stupid. The police and EMS shared with me that rigor mortis had already set in and it looked as the baby had been dead for more than 24 hours. The parents went back to gaming because they wanted to finish their match or whatever. The mother showed zero remorse. However, she was completely fascinated with how popular she was becoming on social media. So much so, that she was super giddy with her local fame and said her kid dying was worth the fame and GoFundMe. The Marine was indifferent to the whole thing. This was one of my husband's Marines. We got the call to go to the family and bring them whatever they needed for temporary lodging. We had no idea what a crap show we'd be walking into. Obligatory not me, but my friend who I'll call Robert. Robert was bummy slobby looking guy who was always on the receiving end of jokes and pretty much only survived because he was a nice guy, so as lazy as he was, most airmen would cover for him. Being a genuinely nice guy goes a long ways in the military. So Robert had an unusually hot wife, like completely surprised everyone that ever saw them together, and we all assumed that he was packing some real heat or that she wasn't a shallow butthole like the rest of us. So I'm not sure how this was arranged, but Robert had a best friend who I'll call Greg, and one day after a few beers Robert decides it would be real cool if Greg fricked his wife and let him watch. Greg is objectively a better looking guy BTW, and it happens. Greg fricks the wife while Robert watches, and this happens a few more times until one of the times, the wife finishes up with Greg and tells her husband, Robert, that she no longer wants to frick him, that she only wants to frick Greg. This made him very upset. And why do I know all of this? Because Robert came into our squadron and had a mental breakdown and told all of us. I was there trying to get some leave paperwork signed. He straight up told this entire story to all of our leadership and finished it off with a demand that Greg be punished. Greg obviously wasn't punished but was asked to stop, which I'm sure he didn't. In fact, no one was punished, and in classic military fashion, this story spread faster than his wife's legs for Greg. Gossip runs hard in the military. Robert was really freaking stupid. I was pretty naive and got maneuvered into a couple of crap situations. First, somehow ended up alone with colleague's wife. She starts telling obscene stories and getting closer and closer to me. Tells me something like, nobody gives better BJs than me. It made sense in conversation, but also wasn't really necessary. My somewhat intoxicated response, okay, then, good night, I'll be leaving now. Second, was drinking with a different colleague. He got very intoxicated and, out of the blue, starting berating me for trying to sleep with his wife. I did not want to sleep with his wife and was not trying to. Noped out of there. 2. Later that night, wife showed up at my apartment, ostensibly to apologize. Heard some other rumors, but was never sure what to believe. My best mate in the army married a girl he just met and then deployed. While he was gone, she kept begging him for money to buy everything that they needed to set up house when he got back. When his tour ended, the girl was genuinely pissed and wanted to know how soon he was deploying again. After some days of heated discussion, it turned out that she expected he would die in combat and told him that her family, and her boyfriend were counting on the money. He was an aircraft tech and never left the airport. He threw her out and told her they were getting divorced, and she offered up her sister as a replacement. Wow, what a terrible human. A buddy of mine I met in ET school had met a younger Mexican girl, fell in love, and wanted to provide a better life for her than he was able to at the time. He had been in the Coast Guard and Ray joined. He had the first pick of where he was going to be stationed next because he'd already had prior service and had been on a ship for years. The school was about 5 months long. While he was there, his wife decided to join too without telling him. They were from South Texas, and he had the choice to be stationed in Galveston, not far from both of their families. But she ends up getting stationed in Oregon, on land. The closest place they could get him to where she was stationed was Seattle, also on land, but he obviously wanted to be close to her, so that's where he opted to choose. However, within a couple of weeks of graduation, she also gets transferred to Seattle. So it looks like things might be okay after all, until the day of graduation when they tell him they have changed his orders and he will be stationed on a polar icebreaker, which would be leaving the week he gets to his new unit. The ship was set to literally make a trip around the world and he'd be gone for 7 months or so. He finds out while off the southern coast of South America that she had been kicked out of the Coast Guard for drugs and for cheating with the guy she was stationed with. Another long story, and was now working as a stripper in Seattle. Were there red flags before they got married? I'm not sure, but it didn't seem that way before she joined the CG. He was a nice and really good dude. Weird turn of events in such a short time. For those who may not know, when being temporarily stationed somewhere for training like this, at least in the CG, they do not pay for your spouse to join you, nor do they provide any form of lodging. She was living in Texas when she joined the service while he was stationed in California. I was in the officer club in Okinawa around 2012 or so. In walk at least 6 women in cut-off shorts versions of flight suits that were bright orange. I was pretty confused until my Marine friend told me that meant their husbands were deployed and they were looking for a good time. Apparently it was an open secret. While I was in the Air Force, way back in 2003 or so, a guy's wife started hanging out in the dorms without her husband. Me and my buddy avoided her because we figured it wasn't going to turn out okay. Yeah, turns out she was just running through every guy in the dorms and even had fricked a guy in our shop. I mean that literally. He brought her into the shop and they had fricked on one of our workbenches. Again, back in the early 2000s, guy I know had his wife attack him with an iron skillet. Both of them were active duty. He ended up choking her out because she was trying to kill him. Cops get called because it's base housing and walls are paper thin. Wife admits she attacked him and he was just defending himself. First sergeant presses charges on the husband. Husband gets found guilty and kicked out of the AF and becomes a house husband for his wife who is still in the military. Wife never got charged with anything. I once pulled over the same lady on 3 separate occasions for speeding in a school zone. I was trying to be nice the first 2 times and let her off the hook, but she started bawling the 3rd time and I lost my patience. She kept sobbing saying her husband was deployed. I let her keep doing this for a couple minutes while I was writing everything she said in my notes. It felt like a hot fuzz moment. I finally asked how her husband being deployed was relevant to her speeding in a school zone and then she just stared at me like she couldn't believe I would question it. She got quiet afterwards and I handed her the ticket and walked away without saying anything else. I got 2. We had a particularly worthless piece of crap in my unit. Let's call him Warren for sake of the story. Warren was the single stupidest sob I have ever met in my entire life. Bar none. Absolute crap Marine who could legitimately barely tie his shoes. The fact that this dude had passed through the recruiters, boot camp, and soy was a pox on the name of the Marine Corps in my opinion. This dude got married before we left for our first tour. It took her about 3 days to send him pictures of her getting a train run on her by 6 black dudes. Him and his wife were both pasty lily white. Not trying to make it xenophobic, just setting the scene. She proceeded to get knocked up during one of these trysts which she was holding at their base housing regularly. She found out which one of the dudes was the father and had him move into their house. When we returned from deployment, he proceeded to forgive her and continue to let her baby daddy live in the house with them. That went on for a couple months till the dude beat him up and they called PMO to get him out of there. Fast forward a few years, I am awaiting separation cause I reached the end of my contract. So is Warren cause we went to boot camp together. He made it all the way somehow. We were living in a barracks designated for soon to be separating Marines. He would hang out and bum beers with people to get drunk, while she would make her way from room to room looking for dong with a decent success rate. That was the state of things when I packed up my crap and left. She offered me a goodbye BJ, which I politely declined. The other dude was also a piece of crap. We will call him Niles. He was one of our junior Marines and was worthless from day one. Dude smoked a pack a day and never passed an annual fitness test as far as I know. Physically and mentally weak. Lived in off-base housing with his wife. The story we got was that his lady was literally puking in the toilet drunk when he proposed to her in between volleys and she said yes and went through with it. This dude would have summoned the platoon over to his apartment on the weekends to do some drinking and hanging out. I never went, mostly because I was very hard on him during the workday being as how I was this chuckle fricks team leader. The story I heard from multiple sources was that every party went pretty much the same way. They would all start drinking. Niles would get wasted way early cause he was a lightweight, pass out, and then his wife would pick 1-3 other guys there and let them have their way with her in the other room while he drunkenly slept the night away. You get only the classiest of people in the Marine Infantry. Well, I was in the Navy. My husband was a civilian. We married young like all service members do at 19. We grew up in the same city and dated for several years. I thought I knew the guy inside and out. He had some anger issues but nothing out of the ordinary for a 19-year-old dude. I deployed to Afghanistan almost immediately and that's when things changed. Some other base wife told him that I was freaking dudes in porta potties, which I was not. He started doing H at some point. Started selling drugs to base wives. Absolutely trashed my house. He sold everything and drained my account. Thousands of dollars in deployment money gone. He left base never to return. My 2 dogs were left in the house. Did more and more damage and were taken to the Humane Society where I paid hundreds to get them back. He hung out with a Japanese girl off base until my return. They got pregnant. Then he started to follow me and threaten me. Anyways, we got divorced and his psycho mother continued to threaten me for several years. Overall, very fun experience. Would rate 4/10. I was in with a guy that proposed to a girl back home that he barely knew. He bought her a car that she complained about but still accepted. He doesn't even have a car and asks for rides everywhere. He got her an apartment back in their hometown and pays her rent. He sends her his entire paycheck to her to help her take care of her son and get anything else she needs. He would tell me fishy things about her that made it obvious she was cheating. Out of nowhere she gets pregnant and stops talking to him completely. I tell him to get a DNA and he refused. Of course, a couple months later the baby is born and looks nothing like him. He gets the test and it's not his daughter. He later found out the baby was by the first kid's basketball coach. The coach tells my friend he's a good father and I am gonna fall back and let you raise her. Dad, my friend is still with her to this day and she refuses to marry him. Happened in 2004 when we got back from the Iraq invasion and such. We had just hit Bangor, Maine, and some vets had cell phones that were donated for us to call and tell our loved ones that we were just hours from reunion. This sergeant called his wife. Whole deployment, no issues. All is good. Or so he thought. We hear a string of cursing like only an infantryman could in this cell go flying like a scud across the terminal. So apparently she decided to wait until he was just a few hours from home after a year of combat to say she was divorcing him. She had left him negative a few hundred in the bank account. What she didn't throw out was now in a couple of trash bags in his truck. Crappy old beater, unsecure, unlocked in the barracks parking lot. He was remarried within 2 months. There were no classy winners or losers in this story. No animals were harmed and no coat hangers bloodied. When my mother-in-law gave birth to my now wife, she was advised to make a sandwich or two in case her husband got hungry while she was delivering her child. Her husband did not attend the delivery, so all she had in the delivery room was a drill sergeant yelling at her to push. When she got home, the father had his car engine disassembled on the table. He asked whether she'd had a boy or girl, got told girl, said oh, and went back to his engine. He really wanted a boy to carry on the family name, but when, in an attempt to save the relationship, they had a boy together, he moved out shortly afterward and never, or rarely, spoke to the son again. The son changed his last name to his mother's name as soon as he legally could. Freaking bastard. On my first deployment we had a comb guy that was dumber than a bag of hammers. His wife wasn't much brighter. We didn't have any steady communication with back home, so the days we had phones or internet access were always a big deal. Well, one of those phone days he came in all excited saying that his wife told him she was 3 months pregnant 4 months into the deployment. He did his rounds of telling everyone all excited, and I don't think anyone had the heart to tell him to think about the math. We get back from deployment and when his son was born he came out looking a little different than what everyone expected. His wife was Mexican, so I guess that was enough to convince him that everything was okay. To be fair, to be 4 weeks pregnant you'd have had frick 2 weeks ago, so a discrepancy of a few weeks isn't proof of anything. Your pregnancy is dated from the first day of your period. You ovulate 2 weeks after that. If I told my husband I was 6 weeks pregnant and he argued we only had sex 4 weeks ago, he'd be wrong. My roommate when I got my first duty station at Drum. This guy fricks another soldier's wife in the troop. Platoon for non-cav. Other soldier finds out, gets heavily drunk and was going to come to the barracks and shoot him. I was the only one in the room that night. Luckily, he passed out in the driver's seat with the car running and his foot on the gas pedal. Nothing happened to other dude or my roommate. We had another shitbag who just wouldn't do anything right. This dude brought nothing on the packing list to a rotation at JRTC at featuring poke. Dude gets scabies and is forced to wash everything he brought with him, which wasn't a lot. We all got chewed out. BC, we didn't look out for our battle buddy. We had a female get prego just to not deploy to Afghan, but our orders got switched and instead of Afghan we go to Iraq and she came too. Oh boy, buckle up. This happened over the course of 3 3-month deployments over a 2-year period. First deployment, I came back to my wife and a big stack of mail. In them were 2 notices of repossession for non-payment of my car, 3 final notices for all of our utilities, and a letter from the landlord. I started off with the car, since I didn't want it to be repossessed. I went to our joint bank account and found it empty. No bills had been paid in 3 months. When I asked her about what happened to all of our money, she said, "I went to Waffle House a lot." Second deployment. I came back to a house with 4 dogs and 3 cats. There was the outside garbage can sitting in the middle of the living room. Oh, and a homeless guy was sleeping on my couch. She, apparently, had taken to volunteering at the local animal shelter and had to save all these animals from being euthanized. The backyard had no grass left from the dogs digging. The carpets were torn up from the feral cats, and there were pile of dog crap, petrified, all over the house. But when asked about the garbage can, she said that it was just too hard to take the trash out. When asked about the homeless guy, she said that she had met him at Waffle House and he just needed some help. The third deployment. I came back to my wife having 2 new make friends. After pailing around with them for a couple months, a different girl friend told me that my wife had been cheating on me with these 2 guys. When I asked about the cheating, she said she only sucked his dong because it was Christmas and she hadn't gotten him a gift. Ugh. At no point do you write that you've divorced this woman, and I find that concerning. Not mine, but the wife of my CO of the training command I was in tried to have the Air Force guard mastered for not saluting her. She was a civilian. Okay, back in 2004 I am deployed to Iraq. I get a FedEx box. My wife of 80 years, who was in the Navy, had sent me a note that read, "Your dog died," paperclip to a picture of my 7-year-old Queensland heeler. Under that photo was our divorce papers signed and filled without my presence or knowledge. She had full power of attorney. I came home after 18 months away, yay stop loss, to a storage shed that had been picked over by her relatives and about $12K in savings. Should have been closer to $80K, but she took her half. She apparently fell in love while out on a cruise and decided that it was in her best interest to just cut strings and move out. So she did move, and put a 3-bedroom home into a 10x10 U-Haul storage unit that I was on my credit card for over a year. The value of those contents? About $500 in furniture. Yeah, being married while in the service was great. My husband is in the army and we live on base. Our neighbor regularly beats the ever-loving crap out of his wife. One night when we first moved in, before we knew he was hitting her, we had them over for drinks and he was bragging about how much his first SGT loves him. He said verbatim, "I could beat her and no one would do anything about it because they freaking love me." I've personally called the MPS multiple times, and every time he came home after spending a few days in the barracks, before he left she pretty much lived at our house because of his abuse. They're 25-28, living in Osaka. She has no family and nowhere to go and she was too scared to leave. Now that he's deployed, I've been helping her pack her crap so she can get out of here before he gets back. She even has a job lined up in the lower 48. Most of these stories are about women cheating and spending too much money, and there are many about how abusive the soldier can be as well. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.